Ruby Paget was a 20-year-old homeless runaway.
She had to scrap and fight every day just to survive.
She found her savior in a streetwise 25-year-old named Mitch Sims.
He saw she was struggling and took her under his wing.
They were two lost souls that came together.
Their passion seemed to make them inseparable until their small town was rocked by a shockingly violent crime.
There had been shootings at the local pizza establishment.
There's blood everywhere. It looked like a torture scene.
But this brutal murder was only the beginning.
There were 3 more murders targeting the same pizza chain.
I don't think anybody could have anticipated that these murders could get so obscene.
Now, join investigators as they follow a twisted trail of bodies in a cross-country manhunt to catch 2 seemingly unstoppable serial killers.
There's 2 sociopaths out there targeting pizza delivery men.
December 4th, 1985, Hanahan, South Carolina. At 2:30 a.m., officers on duty at the downtown police headquarters were startled when a gravely injured man walked through the front doors.
He staggers into the police dispatch office.
He was bleeding and was in very, very bad shape.
The man was dressed in a blood-soaked pizza delivery uniform, and his injuries were both shocking and extensive.
He had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to his head and neck.
He can hardly talk. He doesn't have a lot of teeth left because he's been shot, and some of the teeth were knocked out of his skull because of the bullet.
While they waited for the ambulance to arrive, the officers fought to stabilize the man's wounds and noticed something strange.
He still has a telephone cord wrapped around his wrist.
That's a very strange thing to see. What happened to this man?
They're wondering, hey, has this guy been the victim of some sort of kidnapping? Was this individual tied up? Was he shot trying to escape?
Only the victim knew, and he was barely clinging to life and unable to speak. But what no one could have known was that this bizarre crime was not an isolated event, but rather the first in a string of unspeakably violent crimes that would lead police on a nationwide manhunt for 2 merciless killers whose bloodlust was only matched by their ruthlessness.
No one knew what was coming.
West Columbia, South Carolina, a cozy suburb just outside the state capital. But for young Ruby Paget, growing up in West Columbia was far from comfortable.
Ruby comes from a very, very impoverished beginning. She basically bounced from trailer park to trailer park.
Ruby's youth was marred by nightmarish violence.
Her father was an abusive alcoholic that regularly beat the mother severely.
By her mid-teens, Ruby was willing to gamble that life on the street would be safer than staying at home.
Ruby's childhood was so intolerable that she makes a decision to run away when she was 15 years old. Ruby didn't have a lot, and she didn't have a great education. She didn't have a lot of skills.
But what the young runaway lacked in education, she quickly made up for with street smarts.
She learned quickly how to use what she'd been gifted with, and that was her physical appearance.
Ruby's head-turning good looks drew men like flies to honey. But relying on sugar daddies to support her also came with a downside.
She'd had multiple relationships with various men who often quite physically and verbally abusive to her.
But Ruby was a survivor and weathered the abuse drifting between boyfriends as she struggled to scrape by.
She would go from couch to couch, bed to bed, anything she could do to get money for food. It was a very tough life.
Ruby dreamed of finding a way off the streets and away from the abusive men that plagued her late teens. It looked like she finally found what she was looking for in the summer of 1985, when she caught the eye of a handsome 25-year-old strike organizer named Mitch Sims.
He was monitoring picket lines for different demonstrations that were going on behalf of the union.
He seemed authoritative. He seemed like he knew what he was doing.
He's in charge. She was attracted to that.
And it was clear Mitch was attracted to Ruby.
Mitch was struck by that eye candy. Here was a young girl, very attractive.
She was beautiful, and she was flirting with him and using the only commodity at her disposal, and he was into it.
And when Mitch and Ruby began hanging out off the picket line, they quickly realized they had a lot in common. Like Ruby, Mitch had also been raised in a household scarred by violence.
They grew up with an abusive stepfather in the home.
By the time he was a teenager, he had already seen things that most people don't ever see in their lifetime.
At 18, Mitch enlisted in the U.S. Army. For a child raised in chaos, the structure of Army life was a welcome change.
He's had so much instability growing up, and it was really a good choice for him to try to seek out structure, and it makes sense that he would want to.
He was a good soldier. He did what he was told, and there were no problems.
But Mitch was still haunted by the abuse of his past. He suffered depression and fell into substance abuse.
Mitchell basically felt unworthy. He felt like he was a loser. That's what his stepfather had drilled into his head.
Now, not even the military could keep Mitch's life on track. He bounced from one dead-end job to the next before landing a management position at a pizza delivery franchise. To his surprise, Mitch liked the work, so he tried to clean up his act, hoping his job with the pizza franchise might lead to a stable future.
He was a very good worker.
But the pizza delivery business wasn't without its stresses. After 1 year, Mitch left his management position with the pizza franchise and eventually landed his job organizing picket lines, where he met Ruby Paget. To Ruby, Mitch was unlike any man she'd ever known.
They both came from such severe abusive backgrounds. That was an instant connection for them.
The two young survivors quickly grew to trust each other. Their combination of deep personal connection and strong physical attraction proved to be explosive.
It became an intimate relationship, and it became a very intense relationship. But they were two lost souls that kind of came together.
But there was one big problem. Not long into their romance, Mitch revealed a stunning secret.
He was married with 3 kids. It was shocking to learn that this man of her dreams had this secret family.
But Mitch said he was miserable in his marriage. He promised Ruby that he'd found a true love with her that he'd always lacked with his wife. And to prove it, he abandoned his wife and children.
Mitch actually leaves his family and moves in with Ruby.
They moved into an apartment together. Mitch felt good putting a roof over her head. He wanted to provide for her and care for her. He liked rescuing her.
To Ruby, Mitch wasn't just another sugar daddy. He was a soulmate. And after a few months of being together, she felt comfortable sharing a dream she'd had since she was a little girl.
Ruby confided that she dreamed of moving to California and becoming a Hollywood star. Mitch has been her savior, her knight in shining armor who's provided shelter, security, and love. And now she's asking him to help her realize this outlandish ambition.
Mitch didn't flinch at the request and promised Ruby he'd do everything in his power to make her wish come true.
Ruby had high expectations for Mitch, and she wanted a better lifestyle than she was accustomed to or had been used to for all her growing up.
Mitch would have done anything for Ruby at this point, but it was going to take some time to save up enough money for them to move across the country.
In the meantime, Ruby settled for a broken-down trailer Mitch was able to buy in Hanahan, South Carolina, with the money he made from his picket line job. But saving up for their move to California became a lot tougher when Mitch's wife came knocking at their new house.
Mitch's wife wasn't about to let him forget the family he had left behind.
His wife up there was looking for him to pay some child support.
With mounting bills and most of his paycheck going out the door to his wife and children, Mitch and Ruby's new life together was off to a rocky start. To make matters worse, Mitch's position was cut at the picket line company.
They've had a very meager existence, living on fast food, living in a dilapidated, broken-down trailer.
Worried she might never see her Hollywood dreams realized, Ruby became impatient and told Mitch it was time to get his act together.
She kind of gave him an ultimatum. You've got to do something or else it's over. And she would move on to somebody else.
Ruby basically tells Mitch, this is not the lifestyle you promised me. This is not the lifestyle I'm accustomed to.
Faced with Ruby's ultimatum, Mitch knew he had to find a way to get his hands on some more money, quick, or risk losing his new love. But both Mitch and Ruby were about to be faced with more dire challenges than mere money problems, with their romance becoming inextricably linked to a shocking and horrific series of crimes. Coming up, as paramedics struggle to save the wounded man in the police station, officers received word of a second victim. And both victims share one curious detail.
He also had telephone cord wrapped around his wrists.
There's a serial killer on the loose?
20-year-old Ruby Paget had struggled for years to get by on her own, until she fell in love with a handsome 25-year-old ex-military man named Mitch Sims.
They were two lost souls that came together and had a mutual kind of understanding of each other and how much pain and depression that they both had in common.
Both of them, as they were going through life, really never thought that anybody else would have gone through something similar.
By the fall of 1985, Ruby and Mitch had moved into a trailer together in Hanahan, South Carolina. But their love couldn't pay the bills, and Ruby dreamed of a better life waiting for them in California.
She didn't care how. She just wanted him to get money, because without money, it wasn't going to work out and she was going to leave.
Desperate to make Ruby happy, Mitch began trying to think of ways to come up with more money. But both he and Ruby were about to be faced with much bigger problems, by way of a horrifying crime. It began in the early morning hours of December 4th, when a gravely injured pizza delivery man stumbled into the Hanahan police headquarters.
He staggers across this large parking lot to a police station.
The first thing police officers notice is the individual's just bleeding all over the place and barely conscious.
On-duty police were horrified by the man's condition. Multiple gunshot wounds left him covered in blood, and his injuries were so severe that he couldn't speak.
The shots really messed him up bad.
He doesn't have a lot of teeth left because he's been shot, and some of the teeth were knocked out of his skull because of the bullet.
Officers immediately called the paramedic on duty to help stop the bleeding, but it did not look good for this victim.
But who would shoot a pizza delivery man, and why? As they waited for paramedics, police noticed their first clue: a piece of telephone cord wrapped around the man's wrist.
They're wondering, has this guy been the victim of some sort of kidnapping? Or is this individual tied up? Was he shot trying to escape?
Before the ambulance could even arrive, a new development brought detectives a step closer to getting their answer. With the gunshot victim still bleeding on the floor of the precinct, 911 received a frantic call about a second shooting.
They got a call that there'd been some disturbance shooting at the local chain pizza establishment.
Police rushed to the nearby pizza shop to find the aftermath of what appeared to be a violent armed robbery.
The officers basically discovered a very bloody scene.
There was blood everywhere. The cash register was open, the safe was open, and it was obviously a burglary.
Lying on the floor was a second gunshot victim. Like the delivery man back at police headquarters, it appeared he also had been shot multiple times at close range. But that wasn't all. His wrists were also bound with the same kind of telephone cord police found on the first victim. The difference was, this one was dead.
Detectives immediately realized the two shootings have got to be connected.
Police identified the dead man as Chris Zur, one of the pizza chain's delivery drivers. And based on the employees' time cards, it looked like the victim who'd stumbled into the police station was the restaurant's assistant manager, Gary Melky. Investigators speculated that an armed assailant had bound and shot the two employees, took the cash, and left both victims for dead. But Gary hadn't died.
Gary Melky was the only eyewitness they had alive to this horrendous crime. He'd lost an awful lot of blood, and investigators were counting on him as the only eyewitness to solve this crime.
Paramedics fought to stabilize Gary's wounds, but despite their best efforts, Gary didn't make it.
He passed away.
With their only witness now dead, detectives were faced with the difficult challenge of tracking down a killer based on two simple clues.
The victims are both pizza delivery guys, and they're tied up with the same phone cord. Beyond that, it's anybody's guess.
But what police didn't then realize was the carnage wasn't over. Someone was targeting the employees of a specific pizza chain restaurant. And before police could figure out a motive or who was behind the crimes, the body count would more than double. Coming up, a 911 call leads police from one gruesome crime scene to another.
Two men hanging by their necks from a storage rack.
And an eyewitness's near brush with one of the killers reveals a startling clue.
The way this guy is cooking, he's worked in a pizza place before.
Ruby Paget and Mitch Sims fell in love in the summer of 1985. Their shared history of abuse had created an instant bond and an irresistible attraction.
They both came from such severe abusive backgrounds. That was an instant connection for them.
They understood each other.
Looking for a fresh start, the couple moved to Hanahan, South Carolina, where Mitch struggled to find a way to make ends meet. But while Mitch tried to figure out how to support his new life with Ruby, Hanahan police were busy investigating a pair of brutal murders. In the early morning hours of December 4th, two pizza shop employees, 24-year-old Gary Melky and 24-year-old Chris Zur, were tied up and shot inside their store during a deadly armed robbery.
Homicide detectives don't have a lot to go on at this point. They're just looking for any kind of clue.
Detectives got the break they were looking for when they spoke with one of the first responders who treated Gary. The paramedic said that just before Gary died, he managed to say a few words, including the name of the person who shot him.
Mitch shot me, Mitch shot me.
But who was Mitch? And what was his connection to the two victims? When detectives checked the pizza shop employee records, they got their answer. One of the restaurant's pizza delivery drivers was named Mitch Sims.
He was employed by this particular pizza chain.
It turned out that Mitch had been so desperate for money to make Ruby happy that he'd swallowed his pride and gone back to work for the same pizza chain where he'd once been a manager in Colombia.
He was faced with the issue of having to humble himself, go back to this pizza chain.
In November, Mitch had talked his way back into a job at the local franchise, but not the one he'd hoped for.
The pizza chain wound up hiring Mitch back to go to work delivering pizzas.
To police, the revelation that a delivery driver might have been the shooter suggested that the store robbery was an inside job. But when investigators asked coworkers about Mitch, they had a hard time believing the recently hired delivery driver could have been responsible for the shocking crime.
They'd always had a pleasant relationship with Mitch. It just came as a total surprise and total shock.
Gary had lost a lot of blood. Police couldn't help but wonder if maybe he was just trying to ask if Mitch was all right.
To find out the truth about their dying victim's last words, investigators decided to pay Mitch Sims a visit. But when officers arrived at the trailer Mitch shared with his girlfriend Ruby Paget, they found no one at home.
Nobody responded to the knocks on the door, and they went around the trailer, and it didn't seem to be any life inside.
Police reached out to Mitch and Ruby's friends and family, who told them Ruby had always dreamed of moving to California, but they didn't think the couple would go without telling anyone.
Why would they just disappear without talking to anyone? Unless there was a reason they needed to get out of town really fast.
Did the fact that Mitch and his girlfriend were both missing mean he was the shooter? Or was it possible Mitch could be a victim as well?
The two victims are delivery drivers. Mitch is a delivery driver. For all they know, he's dead too. Or maybe he and Ruby just went on vacation.
Police couldn't say for sure until they found the couple. They immediately put out bolo alerts on both Mitch and Ruby. 2 weeks went by with no sign of Mitch or Ruby. Then, police finally got a major break in the case by way of a phone call from fellow investigators over 2,000 miles away in California. On December 10th, just after midnight, police in Glendale, California received a call from a delivery driver who told them he just had a disturbing experience at the local pizza shop where he worked.
An employee of the store and his wife stopped by the Glendale pizza shop near midnight that night to order a pizza on their way home.
The caller said that his coworker manning the counter had acted strangely.
His friend in the store who was working at the time didn't really acknowledge him.
The coworker took his order and then went into the back. But the man who came out and replaced him at the counter was a complete stranger. And the caller told police that this mystery employee made an odd request.
This strange employee said, "Hey, why don't you go out, wait in the car? I'll bring it out to you."
The man complied with the request and drove away after receiving his pizza. But the employee's odd behavior and unfamiliar face led the caller to assume the worst.
He was suspicious that there was a robbery going on.
Patrol officers were immediately dispatched to the pizzeria, but when they got there, they found it abandoned.
The store is empty, the lights are shut off, the open sign has been turned off. It appears for all purposes to be closed.
But once inside, investigating police heard muffled cries from the kitchen. And when they opened the door of the walk-in freezer, they couldn't believe their eyes.
Two men hanging by their necks from a storage rack with their hands tied behind their back.
Even more shocking was the fact that both victims were still alive. They appeared to have kicked boxes from nearby shelves and stood on them to keep from suffocating.
And they had to stand on their tiptoes to not choke, struggling not to die.
Investigators had never seen anything like it. Whoever did this to these men obviously wanted them to suffer.
It was intended to be a cruel death. They were going to die a slow death, fighting with their own bodies.
Police cut the men down and asked them what happened. The two employees said their ordeal had begun around 11:45 p.m.
When male and female come in, the male pulls a gun.
The male individual walks in and says, "If you scream, if you yell, if you do anything, I will kill you."
The man then passed his gun to his accomplice and ordered the two employees into the back room.
He gives her the gun, tells them to go into a back office and basically hold them there.
While the man emptied the cash register, the employees prayed that the couple would simply take what they came for and leave. But then they were interrupted when their off-the-clock coworker came in the store to order a pizza.
The customer was the off-duty coworker who had called police.
The gunman told one of the hostages to take the order, warning him not to let on that anything was out of the ordinary. Then, while the other terrified hostage watched, their captor surprised them by preparing the pizza to order himself.
He knew exactly what the store was all about.
It's clear from the way he's cooking that this guy's worked in a pizza place before.
A short time later, the coworker left with his pizza, and the two men were once again alone with their captors. Fearing for their lives, the employees told the couple that their delivery driver, John Harrigan, was out making a delivery, but was expected back at any moment.
They have another employee who should be coming back very soon.
But the male captor's response chilled his prisoners to the bone.
He said, "Listen, I'm not worried about him. He won't be coming back."
The man then pulled up his sweater to reveal a pizza delivery uniform.
He's wearing a company shirt and a name tag that said John.
This guy's wearing their driver's uniform.
But did that mean John Harrigan was dead? Or was it possible he'd been left alive like the two employees in the meat locker? To find out, police knew there wasn't a moment to lose.
Police get the employees to give them the address of Harrigan's last delivery, which turns out to be room 205 of a nearby hotel.
Police raced to the hotel, where they got a key from the manager, and stormed inside the room with weapons drawn. At first, it appeared to be deserted.
It was dark, but there was a light on in the bathroom at the very back of the motel room. You could hear the sound of water running.
Investigators cautiously followed the sound and opened the bathroom door. What they discovered inside was shocking.
Here was the body of a young male.
They found him actually floating in the tub. The water was still running from the faucet in the bathtub, but he was hog-tied.
The victim had been stripped of his clothes, and a search of his belongings confirmed he was the pizza delivery driver, John Harrigan. It looked like the couple who'd robbed the pizza shop and left two employees for dead was also responsible for this killing. And since the same pizza franchise had been targeted, police investigators wondered if this new incident could also be linked to a deadly armed robbery that made headlines in South Carolina. Thanks to nationwide APBs, police knew that Mitch and Ruby were being sought for questioning in the South Carolina pizza chain robbery. Was it possible the same couple had also struck here in California?
With Ruby and Mitch on the run, was it possible they were the killers in this case as well? Had they driven over 2,000 miles to rob another pizza delivery place?
But a preliminary search of the crime scene offered little to help detectives identify who did it. The killers had taken great pains to cover their tracks. And the name the room had been registered under was quickly determined to be a fake.
There was no evidence there other than John Harrigan's body in the bathtub.
Everything in that room had been completely wiped down.
Then, determined crime scene detectives found a spot that the killers had apparently overlooked.
They discovered a thumbprint on the inside of the toilet paper roll. That was a piece of gold for us.
Coming up, police race to find their suspects before they can kill again.
Their crime spree wasn't over yet.
And detectives unearth a dark and disturbing motive for the killings.
Adding this kind of sexual enticement made their crimes even more exciting and that much more dangerous.
Ruby Paget and Mitch Sims were soulmates who moved to Hanahan, South Carolina in search of a fresh start. But a vicious shooting in their local pizza shop had left Ruby and Mitch as the prime suspects. And now investigators were wondering if the couple was also responsible for a second armed robbery of the same pizza chain on the other side of the country. The store employees described their attackers as a Caucasian male and a blonde female. And evidence suggested that they were responsible for the death of John Harrigan as well.
The couple had apparently tried to clean the hotel room to remove their fingerprints, but they missed a spot.
A fingerprint left on a toilet paper roll at one of the crime scenes soon confirmed their suspicion.
We had identified a fingerprint that belonged to Mitch Sims.
And if Mitch was the assailant, it stood to reason that his blonde accomplice was Ruby Paget.
At this particular point, we had identified both Ruby and Mitch as being the subjects wanted in our murder, in addition to the murders back in South Carolina.
It looks like they've got a pair of cross-country killers using their inside knowledge of this pizza chain to commit a series of robberies, and they'll murder anyone who gets in their way.
But where was the couple now? When Glendale police searched the motel grounds, they got a new lead. The pickup truck belonging to slain delivery driver John Harrigan was missing.
The only thing we could really see or surmise was that John Harrigan's truck had been used as the getaway vehicle for both these particular individuals.
Investigators issued arrest warrants for both Ruby and Mitch and updated the nationwide Bolo alert to include the stolen truck. But with the entire United States between crime scenes, investigators feared the couple could be anywhere.
There's a lot of space between, one side of the country and the other side of the country. To track somebody like that was fairly difficult.
As national media began reporting on the case, Mitch and Ruby's horrific crimes quickly became a sensation.
There's two sociopaths out there targeting pizza delivery men. A couple of serial killers on the loose, and they could be in your city right now.
The pizza chain itself had offered $100,000 cash for the arrest of these two particular individuals.
And on Christmas Day, the media blitz finally paid off.
Police get a tip from a man in Las Vegas who claims he was there with Mitch and Ruby just a couple of days ago, and he gives them the name of a hotel where they're staying.
The Las Vegas PD SWAT team converged on the motel, and a heavily armed platoon of cops approached the room.
They knocked on the door. Ruby answers the door. Mitch was sitting on a bed.
They see all the cops with guns and riot gear and give up without a fight.
While officers escorted the couple to a local police station, detectives combed the hotel for clues. And they found chilling evidence that Ruby and Mitch had been preparing to strike again.
They had the yellow pages open to the page for the local pizza parlors in Las Vegas.
Their crime spree wasn't over yet. They were going to continue, and basically weren't going to stop until they actually got caught.
Detectives separated the lovers for questioning, but it didn't seem as though Mitch was going to crack easily.
He's just sitting there looking at us, eyeing us over. He didn't want to talk to us. He made that very clear.
But as they got up to leave, he finally spoke.
He says, "I had to kill that boy." I said, "What?" And he says, "I had to kill that boy. He would identify me."
When investigators pushed for more details, Mitch refused to say another word.
He chose to stop the interview. He didn't want to answer any more questions about that.
But in a nearby interrogation room, Ruby was eager to come clean. According to Ruby, the crime spree was all Mitch's idea. She claimed it started months before when Mitch angrily quit his first management job at the pizza shop in Columbia. Apparently, Mitch had been furious after he worked months of long shifts, but didn't receive a scheduled work bonus in his paycheck.
He didn't get the bonus that he expected. He lashed out at his manager.
Basically told the employer to take the job and shove it, and he stormed out of the place.
But Mitch hadn't been content to simply quit. Ruby said he would often talk about getting even with his former employers.
He would obsess about it. He talked about bombing the place and shooting it up. He just ruminated on getting revenge.
Ruby said after they moved to Hanahan, things had gotten worse. When Mitch got desperate for work, the pizza company hired Mitch back, but only as a delivery driver. Mitch felt humiliated delivering pizzas door to door after being a manager, and his fury only grew. The fact that Mitch and Ruby were barely getting by only added fuel to the fire.
They were short of money. They couldn't pay the bills.
Then Ruby told police that in the early morning hours of December 4th, Mitch came home with a surprise. Over $1,000 in cash. Ruby said she was so excited that she didn't ask her lover where the money came from.
Here was this promise to go to Hollywood, and how else would she get there if it wasn't with Mitch?
But the couple never made it to Hollywood as they planned. Instead, they'd only gotten to Glendale before the money ran out.
They're just getting high, getting drunk. Ruby tends to live in the now, in the moment. And Mitchell is kind of the same way.
But Ruby said Mitch told her there was plenty more money where that came from. And that's when he admitted that he'd robbed the same pizza chain that had the nerve to deny his bonus back in Colombia. And he planned to do it again.
It's pretty incredible that he held a grudge about a lost bonus this long, let alone kill 3 people over it.
But instead of being appalled by Mitch's confession, Ruby admitted she was turned on. She liked that Mitch was willing to do anything to make her happy. And she even told him she wanted to play her own part in the next robbery. On the night of December 9th, Ruby placed a delivery order over the phone and watched from the motel window for the driver to arrive. When he did, Ruby made sure to welcome him warmly.
She was really using the commodity at her disposal. And she's a beautiful woman. Adding this kind of sexual enticement and made their crimes even more exciting and that much more dangerous.
John Harrigan had been dispatched to this particular hotel to deliver pizza. She opened up the door, asked him to come in and put the pieces down on the table just inside the motel room.
But once John was inside the room with the door shut behind him, his fate had been sealed.
He was met with a gun to his head.
Ruby claimed Mitch held John at gunpoint and robbed him of the money he had on him. Then, Mitch had made John take off his uniform and pushed him down onto the bed.
Sims takes a washcloth and stuffs in his mouth, wraps one of Sims's own socks around the mouth to secure the washcloth, carries him into the bathtub, puts a pillowcase over the kid's head, and sort of garrots him then with a rope. The tub is being filled, the water's running. And Ruby sort of tapped danced around a lot of that, but ultimately she did say that he held the kid's head under the faucet till the kid died.
Ruby and Mitch now both faced a slew of serious charges.
1 charge of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and so forth and so on.
And even with Ruby's confession in hand, a surprising turn of events in the courtroom would leave prosecutors scrambling to make those charges stick. Coming up, Mitch's defense makes a shocking claim.
Mitchell Sims had not intended to kill John Harrigan.
20-year-old Ruby Paget and 25-year-old Mitch Sims had started out as passionate soulmates. But now the lovers were awaiting separate trials for the brutal murder and robbery of 21-year-old John Harrigan, a pizza delivery man in Glendale, California. Police also suspected that Mitch had killed 2 other employees from the same pizza chain during a robbery 2,000 miles east in Hanahan, South Carolina.
He tied these guys up. He shot these poor innocent, employees. They never had a chance.
In January of 1987, a Glendale, California jury heard opening statements in the state's trial against Ruby Paget. On the stand, Ruby claimed she was innocent. She told the jury that her boyfriend Mitch had done all the planning and the killing himself.
She had nothing to do with it. It was all Sims.
She described how Mitch carried him through the doorway and put him in the tub and basically made sure he stayed there.
Ruby insisted that she'd only gone along with Mitch's unspeakable crimes out of a sense of misguided loyalty and fear for her own life.
She loved this guy for her own weird reasons. Secondly, I think she was in fear of him.
However, prosecutors argued that Ruby's version of events was physically impossible. The facts showed that Mitch couldn't have carried John Harrigan to the bathtub alone.
John Harrigan weighed a good 160 pounds.
It took 2 people to carry this kid into the bathroom. She helped carry that young man into the bathtub. She was very actively involved.
The jury agreed. On February 26, 1987, 21-year-old Ruby Paget was found guilty of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of armed robbery.
She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Shortly after Ruby's conviction, Mitch's trial began. Prosecutors alleged that Mitch's crimes were the result of his grudge against the pizza chain. But the defense argued it was Ruby's insatiable need for money that put Mitch in this position.
Ruby was very demanding. She was pressuring him to get money.
Nothing was ever enough. She wanted to move to California, but she also wanted to party. You can only pay for so much as a pizza delivery guy.
He would have done anything to keep her.
Mitch's lawyers argued that he had committed the robberies, but steadfastly denied that he was responsible for the murder.
Mitchell Sims had not intended to kill John Harrigan. He just meant to tie him up.
His intention was just to basically bind him so he couldn't run away.
Mitch's attorneys claimed that when Mitch and Ruby left the motel, John Harrigan was still alive. His death, they argued, was just a tragic accident.
John Harrigan himself, by struggling, struck his head, knocked himself unconscious, and fell in the water and died.
But on May 20th, 1987, the jury announced they'd found Mitchell Sims guilty of first-degree murder and armed robbery.
The DA's office was pursuing the death penalty, and they got it. Mitch was sentenced to die.
In their brief time together, Mitch and Ruby managed to live the life they'd always dreamed of.
They were finally having this fantasy life that both of them probably never imagined they could have.
But to fuel their fantasy, the lovers had created a nightmare beyond imagining for their victims.
They're not seeing it. They're not seeing the brutality, the pain, the suffering the victims are going through.
These two were on a collision course. And when they finally came together with both of their horrible experiences, it was basically something that was going to self-destruct in no time.